Armageddon. Let's have a look at it. It's quite clear in passages of the Bible such as Daniel chapter 11, Ezekiel chapter 38, and Zechariah chapter 14. But let's look at it just very briefly. Israel will be invaded. They will be invaded by Russia and a large number of nations that come with Russia through Turkey. They will come down into Israel by land and also will send ships by sea. They will actually bypass Israel to a degree coming down the coast, because the first objective is to take control of Egypt. Now, in time gone by, the great conquerors of the world have always known that if they wanted to rule the world and solve any question of the Middle East, they needed to control Egypt. And you can think back to Alexander the Great, you can think back to Napoleon, you can think of Germany in the First World War, Hitler in World War II, all wanted control over Egypt. So Daniel chapter 11 says that the king of the north, the king of this great confederacy of nations that are going to precipitate the Battle of Armageddon, will first of all come down into Egypt. And as they come down, we read that Edom and Moab and Ammon, now these are the same countries we were just reading of a moment ago that Israel will have a significant influence over in the last days. The area of Jordan will escape this initial invasion unscathed. And the reason for that is that when the Battle of Armageddon takes place, those who flee from the battle, who God will protect, will actually cross over into the area of Jordan and will be protected in that area while the onslaught is taking place within the land of Israel around Jerusalem. Now, the next stage is that when the great power of the north, particularly led by Russia, is based in Egypt, they'll now hear news from around Jerusalem, tidings in Israel, and that they will trouble Russia, and they will now move forward against Jerusalem to bring about that great Battle of Armageddon. And then many of the Jews will flee, as we said, to the protection of Jordan. Isaiah chapter 16 actually backs that up. Let mine outcast dwell with thee, Moab. Be thou a covert to them from the face of the spoiler, that is, the great armies from the north, the spoilers who come to take a spoil, as Ezekiel chapter 38 says. They will be protected across the area of the River Jordan and the Dead Sea in the region of Jordan, modern Moab, Edom, and Ammon, as mentioned there. Now, Ezekiel chapter 38, as we said, tells us about the great group of nations from the north mainly, as we see there in the red, and some nations from Africa too, in red. All these are opposed to Israel in the last Battle of Armageddon. Ezekiel 38 verse 8, just to give us an idea of context here. After many days thou shalt be visited, that is, Israel will be visited in the areas and the nations that they've been scattered. God will visit them. In the latter years thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword, and is gathered out of many people, this is the nation of Israel, against the mountains of Israel, which have been always waste, or for a long, long time, waste. But it is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall dwell safely, all of them. The word safely is actually just as well translated, confidently. So Israel will not be at the mercy of the nations around them in the area of the Middle East. In other words, not certainly at the mercy of the Palestinians or the Lebanese or the Jordanians or other nations nearby. They will dwell confidently and safely. And as we saw from the previous prophecy we looked at, the Palestinians, the Philistines, will be dealt with, and Israel will feel quite safe dwelling in their land before this great invasion of Ezekiel 38 happens. And as we know, the nations from all there in the red, from the Russian influence and other countries around, including Persia, which is of course today Iran, these countries will come against Israel. They'll first go into the land of Egypt, and then they'll reverse back up and come to the land of Israel, to Jerusalem, for that great final conflict. Ezekiel 38 verse 13 mentions some Arab countries. Now let's have a look at this. These Arab countries, in the green in particular, Sheba and Dedan, down you can see there to the east of Israel, southeast, the Arabian Peninsula countries, and that includes other countries nearby to Saudi Arabia, such as Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, and others. These will be favourably disposed towards Israel, but not wanting to get involved in the Battle of Armageddon. And Israel will more or less be left to its own devices until Jesus actually stands on the mountains of Israel and fights for his people. Now, the others with them are called the countries of Tarshish. You can see on the green there that represents Great Britain. And you'll see there in verse 13 of Ezekiel 38 the young lions of Tarshish, and that is other countries associated with Britain in the Commonwealth, and that would include countries like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, India. These people will speak out against the invasion, but all they'll be able to say is, "Art thou come to take a spoil, Russia and your company? Hast thou gathered thy company to take a prey, to carry away silver and gold, to take away cattle and goods, to take a great spoil?" So does Russia see not only strategic interest in being involved in controlling the Middle East, but also great wealth to come from there. And that's certainly the case. They're going to try and take over many of the resources of the world, and particularly oil and other things that they could control, including the Suez Canal, trade routes and so on, to take control really of the world. Is that what you're trying to do? And that's all they can do is voice it. Perhaps at the United Nations they might say, well, what's going on here? And we know how ruthless Russia can be and will be, and other countries with them at that time. Well, we're looking more at this question of how this Palestinian situation is going to be resolved, and we're going to suggest to you that we'll look shortly at Joel chapter 3, that the Palestine and Lebanon questions, their futures, will be solved by an agreement between Saudi Arabia and perhaps other countries that are close to Saudi Arabia at the same time, and Israel. An agreement. Well, we know that an agreement's recently been in the wind in terms of a peace deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel. We'll talk about more on that in just a moment. The verse we're going to be looking at, and we'll look at it in detail as we said shortly, but first of all just get the gist of what Joel chapter 3 and verse 4 in particular is saying. And we're looking at Joel 3 verses 4 to 8 as having great relevance to the present situation in Palestine and Lebanon and their association with Israel and the potential for great conflict, which has already got started and could get a whole lot worse. God's saying to these places, "What have you to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon?" And of course, that's the area of Lebanon in ancient times, Lebanon today, and all the coasts of Palestine. Now, that's the only time that you'll find in your King James Bible the name Palestine. So this is obviously relevant to everything that's happening today. The very fact that it's translated Palestine draws our attention to what's going on over there alongside Israel right now. And the answer is given in verse 8, and we'll explore what the meaning of this really is in a moment. "I will sell your sons and your daughters into the hand of the children of Judah, and they shall sell them to the Sabaeans." Now, the Sabaeans in ancient times were the people of Saudi Arabia today. Now, what's been happening with this potential peace deal that has come to the fore just fairly recently, and we'll show a video shortly with just a couple of clips about Israel and Saudi Arabia's views about a potential peace deal over the last few weeks, just before this terrible cruelty that was wreaked by the terrorists in southern Israel. The Palestinians actually saw what was going on here and saw that they were being left out of negotiations between Israel and its peaceful neighbours. As we know, the Abraham Accords of recent years have really left the Palestinian question out of the picture. And the Palestinians now seeing Saudi Arabia likely to do a deal with Israel and not necessarily solving the Palestinian question before they finish that deal, they feared that they were being marginalised and they were going to be left behind. So they felt that it was high time to prove that they were still relevant to what happens in the Middle East. But what the terrorists, of course, have shown is that they're not so much relevant as just absolutely cruel and savage people. Well, here's our video.
no question. The Abraham Accords heralded the dawn of a new age of peace. But I believe that we are at the cusp of an even more dramatic breakthrough, an historic peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia. But I also believe that we must not give the Palestinians a veto over new peace treaties with Arab states.
What would it take for you to agree to normalize relations with Israel?
For us, the Palestinian issue is very important. We need to solve that part, and we have good negotiations continue till now. We gotta see where it will go. We hope that it will reach a place that it will ease the life of the Palestinians and get Israel back, as a player in Middle East.
So you think, if you were to characterize it, are you close?
Every day we get closer.
Yes, clearly the Palestinians had good reason to be concerned that they were being left out of negotiations here, and as Prime Minister Netanyahu said, we don't want the Palestinians having a veto over anything that we can arrange between us and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We want a peace agreement and it'll benefit everybody. And Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, now affectionately known as MBS, ruthless man as he is, but also very bright and smart, he knows that it's best to leave the Palestinians out of any future agreement as well. So when did these two rulers first meet? Have there been things going on secretly in the background? Well, yes, in fact, that's true. There was an amazing situation that arose that brought about the first meeting between these two leaders. And we're talking now a few years ago. It was quite a clandestine meeting, and things were discussed there, which ultimately have led to more open discussions as time's gone on. Around the time of Donald Trump's presidency, and throughout the 4 years, he didn't start any new wars with anybody, but President Donald Trump wasn't averse to approving assassinations of particularly people from Iran and terrorists. And his own forces in 2019 raided the compound of the head of ISIS, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and as they were coming and closing in on him, he activated his own suicide bomb, and that was the end of him. There was another assassination where the United States were involved during that period of time, 3rd of January 2020, and the top general from Iran who promoted terrorism, Qasem Soleimani, he was actually killed by the United States in a surgical drone strike on the 3rd of January of that year. Now, soon after that, in 2020, later in that year, Iran's top nuclear scientist was taken out in an assassination. And this assassination was actually brought about by Israel. Israel, through the Mossad network of spies, arranged this tremendously complicated but well-executed assassination using a machine gun and artificial intelligence that was developed by Israel to take out this chief nuclear scientist, weapons scientist of Iran. And prior to that taking place, just a few days before, these four met in Saudi Arabia in a secret meeting. They secretly met in a place called Neom in Saudi Arabia. And there at that meeting was the Crown Prince bin Salman and Mike Pompeo, who was representing Donald Trump, and Mr. Trump knew all about the plan too. The head of the Mossad, Yossi Cohen from Israel, and Prime Minister Netanyahu, and they met secretly at this place in Saudi Arabia called Neom on the 22nd of December, 5 days before this nuclear scientist was assassinated. And they met down there where Crown Prince bin Salman is beginning to develop this futuristic mega city in Neom. It's positioned there in the Gulf of Aqaba, right near the entrance there, and it's very close to Egypt, and right there in the Gulf of Aqaba, between Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, and Israel. And it's seen as it's going to be developed over the next close on 10 years as being a great link between those countries, potentially. What happened was that Israel didn't have anybody actually on the ground for the assassination in Iran. They checked where this scientist drove his car to work in most mornings, and they set up on the back of a pickup truck in the area there this remotely controlled high-powered weapon, which they set up robotically, and using artificial intelligence worked out all the necessary arrangements for that assassination to take place, shooting bullets into the car, using facial recognition software to ensure that he was the driver. His wife was sitting alongside just 10 inches away, and she wasn't hit by any of the bullets. The satellite control, operated from 1,000 miles away, worked out all sorts of calculations using the artificial intelligence to work out the speed of the vehicle, the likely recoil of the machine gun after each shot, making minor adjustments to ensure that the shots all went in the same direction, and all sorts of artificial intelligence was employed there. And then, of course, after the assassination took place, they remotely exploded the vehicle and the weapon. The bomb went off within the vehicle, and all the evidence disappeared. So nobody could quite work out what had taken place until long after the event. Well, with Mohammed bin Salman being informed, whether in full detail, of what was going to happen 5 days later after their meeting, or whether or not he was told or just told to watch what we're going to do in Iran, I'm quite sure after seeing that happen, and Iran being one of the great enemies of Saudi Arabia, and this great scientist being taken out of the picture, I think he thinks to himself, well, I want one of those. Israel's got those. I'm very happy. I want to share them to share their artificial intelligence in many ways with me, and that would motivate him a long way towards wanting to make a deal with Israel. But there are many other reasons why he would want to make a deal with Israel too. Part of it is this development of Neom, a fantastic new city, costing at least $500 billion to put together in this region, which has been largely unoccupied in Saudi Arabia. Estimates now are taking it out much more than $500 billion. First stage is projected to open in 2025. Well, they're on the way. Construction is certainly taking place there now. Full completion by 2030. And the central city is going to be called the Line. Now, that you can see the red line on the map there under the name Neom. That's actually the extent of the city that's going to be built, 170 kilometres long, but only 200 metres wide. And the reason being that there'll be no cars, no roads, a rail link running right the way through, and everybody living 100 metres one side or the other of that city, with all the facilities at their disposal, and no need for cars. Perhaps there'll be some flying taxis, they say, no carbon emissions, and accommodating up to 9 million people. That picture there is on the Neom website. It's not going to look perhaps quite like that. You can see the little dots there are the flying taxis. All sorts of things could come from this. It's going to be the most modern city in the world, new future, the Prince is calling it. And the question is, in 20 years' time, they estimate to have about 9 million people. Where are those people going to come from? Saudi Arabia's present population is only 36 million, so that's a quarter of their population. Given a little bit of growth, almost a quarter of their population. Where will they come from? Well, there's a suggestion that they may well come from amongst the Arabs who are currently refugees here and there, and possibly the Palestinians. Who can tell? But we're going to look at the Bible just to give us some more of an idea of what this is all about. So what's the benefits of a deal with Saudi Arabia, and what relevance has it got to do with what's happening in Palestine at the moment? Well, there'll be more US support guaranteed for Israel. If this deal is done, of course, President Biden wants to have this peace deal worked out before he ends his presidency. Whether that will happen or not, in that space of time, it's hard to tell at the moment. But for Israel, what do they gain from it? Regional security cooperation, defence, in other words, a buffer against the threat from Iran, with Saudi Arabia more on side, with America more on side as a result of doing this peace deal. Military intelligence can be shared between more countries, the Arab countries sharing their intelligence with Israel. Israel will sell lots of technology to Arab countries. Air and shipping and rail links, we'll talk about that more in just a moment. The economic benefits for the whole region cooperating together, and assistance in solving the Palestinian question. And as you saw, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, he thought, before the blow-up with the Palestinian invasion, Hamas invading the southern areas of Israel, before that, things looked pretty good. There were lots of things being worked out, and so far as bin Salman was concerned, as long as, not necessarily there was a Palestinian state, but as long as the Palestinians had their life eased, that would be sufficient for Saudi Arabia to go ahead with the deal. For them, they would have a closer cooperation with the United States for security, weapons agreements. They want to have buy more weapons from America, and have America support them militarily. And also, between the US and Israel, who are very advanced in nuclear technology as well, civil and possibly military nuclear technology shared with Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia has said in that interview with MBS, he said, if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, we've got to have one too, and where will they get their technology from for that? Now, Israel too, water desalination technology is fantastic, best in the world, and if Saudi Arabia want to open up the deserts, they don't have a river running through Saudi Arabia anywhere. They need fresh water, and they need desalination for their developments along the coast, and that would include Neom. Israel's artificial intelligence advancements, AI. Israel is one of the leading countries in the world in their development of AI, and you saw that in regard to that weapon used to carry out that assassination. The Arabian Peninsula's ports and rail project, well, that's a big one that Netanyahu has spoken about at the United Nations, and actually competitive to China's Belt and Rail initiative. This new initiative coming through area of Arabia and up through Israel, which I'll show on the map in just a second, is a big deal. It's a big advantage for all the transport of goods from India and Asia through the region. Economic benefits for the region, development of the Neom City of the Future, as it's called. Now, at the United Nations recently, Netanyahu showed a map which enraged the Palestinians because it didn't show a Palestinian state separately. But he showed a map, and you can see on the map there the countries which have been cooperating together, and with Saudi Arabia cooperating in a deal too. That opens up the potential for a huge transport corridor running from the Indian Ocean right up through the Arabian Peninsula, out through and through Jordan, and out through Haifa or a port nearby there, and on through the Mediterranean and off to Europe to transport goods manufactured in the east and bring them right across to the west. So it's planned to bring goods from India and beyond through the seaports and high-speed rail links in Saudi Arabia and Israel and on to European markets. So the plan bypasses the shipping choke points at the entry to the Persian Gulf, which of course Iran could block off and has done actually in the past, so that shipping can't pass through the Strait of Hormuz into the Persian Gulf and out from there as well. The Red Sea is capable of being blocked off at its narrow entry. You can see it on the map there, and also the Suez Canal. So this is regarded by both Prime Minister Netanyahu and MBS of Saudi Arabia as a new path to prosperity for all of the Middle East. Wow. Now, when we come to this Operation Al-Aqsa flood, is it going to succeed or won't it? The foundation has been laid to the Dome of the Rock in 688 AD, and from that time no Jews were going to be allowed to worship anywhere near that area, their sacred Temple Mount. The Arabs took it over completely. That's the area where Solomon's temple was, and from 688 AD, when the foundation was laid, the construction commenced, that building became known as the Abomination that maketh desolate. It was set up as per the prophet Daniel chapter 12. So that was the commencement of a very, very significant time period where the abomination that maketh desolate, described in Daniel, is set up for a period of time. Now, it's set up for 3 periods of time, actually, in Daniel chapter 12. Verse 7, verse 11, and verse 12, all commencing in 688 AD, when the abomination that maketh desolate was established. Now, I do have other videos on this channel which you can look at, which talk about the time periods of the prophecy of Daniel. Just going to reinforce that from this perspective, that the Dome of the Rock is the center of the current conflict. When it's named Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, it brings the Dome of the Rock right into play. Now the Bible's got 3 periods in Daniel chapter 12, those 3 verses mentioned there. 1260 days or years, times and the dividing of time times and a half, equates to 1,260 years on the day for a year principle. From 688 to 1948, the first time period was to finish when the scattering of the people was finished, and that happened in 1948. Israel could no longer be scattered. That's the key word from verse 7 of Daniel 12. From verse 11, we have a period of time where, from the establishment of the abomination that maketh desolate, when sacrifices could no longer be offered by Jewish people on that mount, 1290 years. And then after 1290 years, 1978 arrived, and that was the time, the year of the Camp David Accords, when the Egyptian president, during the discussions around the Camp David Accords and the peace arrangement between Egypt and Israel, made a clear statement in writing that the holy sites in the city of Jerusalem should be freely accessible for all peoples to go and worship. Now that, of course, included the area of the Temple Mount and the area where the Dome of the Rock now sits. So that would incorporate the concept that has never really been fully brought to pass, that the Jewish people could go up to that area to worship. Now they've been unable to do so right up until now, but in the last few years more and more Jews have been going up and praying, in fact, on the Temple Mount. And in the last year, 50,000 Jews went up to the Temple Mount. And of course, the Arab peoples there, and particularly led by Hamas now, are saying that shouldn't be happening. The Jewish people shouldn't be allowed to go up to the area of Al-Aqsa, that is, the Temple Mount, round the area of the Dome of the Rock there. They shouldn't be allowed to do so. So this area is in play. Jewish people want the freedom to go up to worship on their most holy site, and the Arabs want to stop them because it's their 3rd most holy site. Well, 1978 was a turning point, because it was the first time that a Muslim leader said all peoples, meaning including not only Christians but Jews as well as Muslims, should be able to go up there. And that was the beginning of the end of the Dome of the Rock. Now it's in play. 1335 years. Verse 12 of Daniel 12 tells us, blessed is he who waits. 1335 years. Another 45 years from 1978. Blessed is he who waits until that day. And the very next phrase is, Daniel, everyone will understand these things, and you will stand in your lot. You will be resurrected to see that wonderful time. Is it 2023, the exact date that Daniel will be raised from the dead? We don't know that exactly yet, but we do know that this is a highly significant year in Bible prophecy. Blessed is he who waits to see that day.